This is an interview with Grant Sanderson, the creator of 3 Blue, 1 Brown, known for making math feel intuitive through clear visuals and thoughtful explanation. He studied at Stanford University in math and worked at Khan Academy and built the Manim animation library to bring ideas like functions as transformations to life on screen. You can read more about Grant on our website, 6degrees.blog, and our Instagram page, 6 Degrees Away. Thank you and enjoy the interview.
Before Three Blue, One Brown, what were you doing and what did you think your life would look like?
Um, I put up the first video in my senior year of college, but it was a couple of years before I kind of dove into the channel as a life path to pursue. And after Stanford, I worked at Khan Academy for a bit. There was a period in life where, like, by day I would make math videos, but by night I would make a different kind of math video. So since that period of my life, I think I always had this gravitation towards teaching, but doing so through the internet. In some way, I had a lot of optimism around that. Um, I wouldn't have told you like a clear picture of life that looked anything like what things are now. But I had a vague sense of enjoying creation, valuing ownership of one's own thing, right? Just kind of doing something distinctive that's your own. I think I always valued that. And I wouldn't have been able to say exactly what form life looked like, but those were principles I had for a while. So insofar as those intersect, and like math and teaching and all that, that's been a part of my life
Right,
since as long as I remember.
right. But do you think when you were, so sorry, just to clarify, did you major in math at Stanford or
I
computer
did,
science?
yeah. So I
Okay.
kind of knew since before I went, like I would want to be a math major. I always described it as being heavily seduced towards computer science while there, where I
Right,
probably
right,
spent more time in the CS department, like in terms of where my friends were, what like
right,
clubs I was part of and such. But since I always knew I wanted to be a math major.
right. And I guess I'm asking this sort of from my experience because I'm thinking of most likely majoring in math, and certainly for many others who are planning on majoring in math. Um, why, like, when it came to math, did you have any particular direction? Like, did you know right off the bat that you were going to go into education of some sort, or were you thinking of perhaps taking some sort of research path, spending your whole life working on a problem like the Riemann hypothesis or something like this?
It was definitely not so clear directed as that on like
Okay.
knowing
Okay.
education is the end goal, knowing a particular.
Right.
I think, and I'm sure this actually resonates with you, Conrad. There's an aesthetic around loving the subject. There's
Right.
a feeling of, boy, do I want to be doing more of this. And especially that age, there's not that much more thought than that.
Right.
It is knowing that there's a passion. I think there's
Right.
a sense of validation. I don't know at what age you first like saw or learned that like a mathematician is a thing, but I remember for me sometime early in high school, like meeting like at the University of Utah, like mathematicians. I'm like, that's a thing. Cool.
Yeah.
Where do I sign up for that? Right. And so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that was maybe the default path in thinking of, okay, major in it. I was very heavily considering just the usual path, kind of go through a PhD program, go into academia, all of that. I do think it was helpful. Honestly, I think if I went to a different school, like if I went to Princeton, I think I probably would just be a mathematician right now. But the feeling of being kind of awash in like an entrepreneurial kind of software-ish
Yeah.
spirit around
Yeah.
the Bay
Yeah.
Area, that resonated with a whole other part of my brain. Okay,
Right.
what I'm doing is not like software startup, but I think that side of thinking about how the stuff you do touches the world rather than just like, hey, what's intellectually satisfying? And also taking seriously the idea that you can just do things. You can just start a thing and kind of put it out in the world.
Right.
I think I was maybe awash in that because of the geography of where I was, that maybe slightly kinked me off the course of necessarily, become a traditional mathematician, which
Interesting.
otherwise all the momentum was there for sure.
Right.
Hmm. So you helped popularize the monster group. If you had to bet, what's the next obscure area of pure mathematics that will suddenly become practical due to developments in quantum computing or neural network interpretability?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question in the light of its second half. Do you mean
Okay.
like, are there going to be things where, as LLMs genuinely discover new math,
Hmm.
there will be a kind of abstract math which is somehow made more understandable as a result of what they're doing?
Hmm.
I mean, that is a whole interesting topic, like the extent to which uh, reasoning models provide genuinely new math. Because at the moment, it's kind of the opposite, where they can prove things much more effectively than they can elucidate like
Right.
novel math. I mean,
Right.
for the student, like for like the three of us, if we're sitting chatting with one of them trying to learn some new math, it's pretty incredible. But I do think it's hard to pin down what's a thing where it was previously not possible to understand, but because of them, there's nothing that comes to mind. Where like, wow, this is suddenly an unlock in like understanding at the scale of just like what do people in general understand, not like what does an individual who's trying to learn and understand. Uh, I mean, I don't know. Like as you ask that, Conrad, does anything come to mind for you as he asks that kind of question?
Well, wait, so Kian, are you talking, could you rephrase that question too? Because I feel
So,
like it was a
so sort of,
little
do you
vague to
think
me.
AI is gonna change math and that there's gonna be new problems that are solved or new areas that become much more popular because there's lots of progress going on in that area?
Yeah, I feel
I,
like there's two, sorry, Grant, I cut you off.
no, I want to hear your answer.
That the way I interpret that, I feel like there could be two branches to that. I think what Grant you were touching on is sort of the fact that perhaps these models could, pave entirely new pathways, although we haven't seen much of that lately. It's like you said, better at sort of proving these existing things. But in terms of, I think another direction you could take that question is um, sort of popularizing these existing branches of math and drawing a wider audience, a wider attention. And that just ties to sort of Grant, what you're doing, right? Like, I mean, I'm certain this has been a large, after effect of your channel and sort of bringing this visual appeal of math that perhaps wasn't as prevalent before with your lovely Manim animations. Again, like just drawing a greater mystique for math and bringing more people into the field and revealing these aspects that people sort of found more abstract, that are sort of more humanized and sort of cast as more, revealing their underlying elegance through these, animations.
Yeah, so an example of that would maybe be like traditionally the study of differential equations for students
Right.
is very centered on like something symbolic, and you've got a bag of tricks and you learn the bag of tricks for how you can address them. But then there's a high level understanding of qualitatively studying them, which is
Right.
greatly aided by visuals and fluency with those visuals or giving people fluency with that. Maybe, like if we want to shoehorn LLMs into the answer in some way, you could say maybe that makes it a little bit more plausible for the professors teaching this to whip up in an animation when otherwise it was this big
Right.
barrier to even do. And so something like differential equations is a perfect example where the qualitative study of it is very different from the like bag of tricks that you'll teach
Right.
that's easier to test to and easier to put up on a blackboard when you're teaching. And so breaking down the barriers towards letting people represent that qualitative side, which just it requires some animation savvy in order to actually do it. That it feels like we're kind of knocking on the door of that, where somebody just asks Claude Code to like make a Manim animation of the like slope field model that they want to show to their class, and they don't have to have
Right.
known how to code or anything in order to do that. They just
Right.
know how to precisely describe what it is they want to make.
Right. I guess on the topic of Manim animation, I guess what inspired you to sort of create this entirely new library for yourself?
So yeah, certainly it wasn't like wow, nothing out there works for my needs, and so I have to go and scrounge something for myself. It was just it's fun to make stuff, and I wanted a personal project to make something, and in this case, like a mathematical animation tool. It just lined up with the kind of things I wanted to do in that moment. Take certain ideas that were in my head and put them onto the screen.
Right.
I think I had a little bit of a torch I wanted to hold up at that time of so much software centered around visualizing functions as graphs, and graphs are great, but there's a lot of math where trying to flex your mind and thinking about functions in different terms stands to be really helpful. I remember a certain aha moment when I was taking complex analysis in college, which was like, just don't even try to think about it as a graph. That it's very unhelpful. Actually, a lot of these ideas where the naive student feels like they have to twist their mind into four dimensions to try to parse it can be totally understood viscerally and clearly just by thinking of, hey, how do all the inputs of your function move over to the outputs? And what does it kind of look like, that input
Right.
space as it goes to the output,
Right.
or domain colorings and things like that. And just adding a little bit of flexibility for how you even choose to visualize it that's not so constrained based on the TI-84 or Desmos or whatever have you that you're usually using by default that that stands to add a bizarre amount of clarity. And so the original version of it that I was writing, which was super terrible, by the way, but it was like all early projects are worth doing just
Right.
for the sake of getting it
Right.
started. It was all centered on mapping inputs to outputs, visualizing functions as transformations. Like the whole
Okay.
architecture of it is centered around like stuff transforming into other stuff,
Right.
and it was kind of motivated by that.
Right. So it was originally sort of, was it originally motivated by trying to visualize sort of linear maps and linear algebra in particular, or were you
Actually, I
already
think
thinking about
complex
extension?
analysis was one of the first things that was
Oh,
motivating me. But
okay.
like linear algebra was sort of easier, I guess, to show and to explain. And
Yeah.
that was maybe one of the earlier cases of, hey,
Right.
here's the thing where I've got this tool set. I think I could really try to put onto the screen what all the professors want to put on the blackboard
Yeah.
with this tool set. And that was also at the time when I was working at Khan Academy and kind of a little bit more awash in thinking pedagogically, as opposed to thinking about, hey,
Right.
what's the math that just interests me and like tickles my brain from a
Right.
puzzle solving perspective. And so that was sort of where the linear algebra series, which is like 9 years
Right.
ago at this point, came from.
Okay. Okay, so you mentioned the sort of the puzzle solving of it kind of tickling your brain. Was this like, I guess, what was the first instinct, or what has always sort of stuck around when it came to math? Like, was it this tickling of puzzle solving that first attracted you to math, that first allured you to that, or was it also this pedagogical like sort of approach of trying to visualize these things that always stuck around, or did that come later? Did that evolve?
Well, let me ask you, Conrad, a question
Yeah.
on. So I feel like there are two categories of content that I think about, and the
Okay.
weight that I've given to them has changed over the years. So one
Okay.
category is it's not math that you're going to see in school necessarily. It's not a topic that you're going to search for because you've been like pining to understand it.
Right.
Instead, it's a clever puzzle or clever proof in some way where the aesthetic I want to give is one where once you understand the problem, it seems really hard, but then there's like a beautiful shift in perspective where suddenly like things fall into place. And that's a feeling I find very satisfying. It's a thing I think some members of the audience find satisfying. But the motivation there, it's not like pre-existing curiosity. I have to like frame the question at the beginning and try to hook someone. So that's category one. And I have a question that I'm
Okay.
getting to. Category
Okay.
two is there is pre-existing curiosity. It's a thing lots of people know about, but they don't know how it works. Where they're like, I've heard of Fourier transforms. I want to know more about what it is. I've heard of neural networks. I've heard of quantum computing. Some optics phenomenon like light bending when it goes through glass. Something where someone has kind of heard of it, might have wondered about it, and I think there's room for visual explanation to really like add clarity.
Right.
So yeah, my question, I'm curious for you, like what's your relationship with each of those categories? Like if some new video is posted, is there one that you find you're like, oh, that's uh I'm like more likely to really want to go for that. Or if you look back to ones that you've like enjoyed or would deepen a relationship with the channel, do you think of those categories differently at all or have like basically a preference?
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. I think, I guess I'll just illustrate with an example because that's quite a big question. But do you know, I'm sure you've heard of the book Linear Algebra Done Right by
Yeah.
Axler. Yeah, yeah. So that book, I was sort of running through it and just this one problem stuck out in particular. And it was sort of, I'm trying to remember exactly. Oh, right. So like proving a closed form of the Fibonacci numbers. And it was under a section for I think it was regarding like eigenvectors, eigenvalues. And so that was so bizarre to me because it was like, how are these two things related? Like how are these two things going to come together? Like how are we going to use this theory of linear algebra with that, which I thought was sort of entirely tangential or entirely orthogonal to the idea of you know,
Like
what was
discrete
that? Did I say linear? Yeah,
sequences
yeah.
and patterns like
Exactly.
Fibonacci. Yeah.
Right, right. And so I guess that ties to this category of like, would that be considered mystique? I feel like it was both. Like on one hand, it felt so inconceivable, but that the fact that it was inconceivable, that it was mysterious, is at the same time what I found so alluring.
Mm.
And so I guess yeah, and then figuring out, oh, this super elegant approach of sort of finding this eigenbasis, I think it involved, and then sort of building, yeah, you build like a linear transformation that modeled sort of the way that you construct the Fibonacci numbers, and then you find an eigenbasis, et cetera, et cetera. Just this nice sequence of elegant steps that suddenly demystifies this whole thing. I don't know. This is the type of stuff that absolutely excites me. I don't
That's
know
an
if that
interesting
makes
answer.
sense.
Yeah, because I mean, where I was getting at, I feel like in my original conception of the channel, I had basically that feeling that you just described is what I was
Right,
trying to ham up as much as possible. Where like
right.
surprising connections, but I think I didn't care about the curricular relevance or the like pre-existing
Okay,
curiosity and motivation, and
right,
where I've maybe shifted weights over the years is giving a little bit more priority to the topics where there is pre-existing curiosity, even if I don't
right,
feel like, hey, this is going to have the really elegant, like clicking moment, aha, just trying to be as clear as I can, uh, actually seems to give a lot of that same feeling. Now, you highlight a very good example, and it's maybe gets me thinking the right way, where that's one where eigenvalues are a thing that people run into in their courses and need to learn about. But there was this example that could nevertheless ignite that same feeling within you. And that maybe
right,
describes the golden topics, where you don't have to choose between the two. You can somehow manage to do both. And I think
right,
when there is a topic that's in demand, a lot of people are curious to understand it, trying to find what makes it really satisfying from that aha problem solving perspective is not obvious, and usually there's not a clear way to do it, or there's a little bit of a trade-off where, hey,
right,
if you want the cleanest possible lesson for eigenvalues, do you really want to like distract with a discussion of Fibonacci? In that case, Fibonacci is simple enough that it's good, but I've run into it before where I'm writing some script and I want to, I want to have this neat example that has some sort of clever aha,
right,
but it's like actually this happened to me last year actually, where I was doing this whole piece on a way that like one of my favorite topics that involves these like block collision phenomenon where pi surprisingly comes up, something where
right,
that's relevant to quantum computing. And I was using this
right,
as like, hey, let's introduce quantum computing, but also in this context. And my original conception was something that really blended the two. We're like both introducing quantum computing, but also showing this really surprising connection. And in the end,
right,
I just like fully pulled out the connection part because it's like, hey, quantum computing is kind of hard enough to wrap your mind around as it is. It was all this
yeah,
added cognitive load on top of it. Um, so this is all to say that's a division that I've felt, and at this point, I think I try to just distinctly categorize. Like, hey, if this video is meant to be puzzle, just lean into that aspect of it. If it's meant to be explainer, don't get distracted with the side
right,
courses.
right,
That's where I've landed. But what you're highlighting is that like every now and then there's a golden intersection.
right. And like when it comes to sort of how you choose what topics to explore, sort of what are your outlets for, okay, this is where I find all my cool math stuff. Or I don't know, maybe you don't have one particular, of course you don't have one particular place, but do you have any, sort of go-to places for really cool math things that you discover?
You're right. There is no one place. Yeah, just like kind of try to keep my finger on a lot of different pulses out there. I
Right,
don't know. Like the MAA has various nice publications. Just people will write into me a lot with things they want to share. I have a list of things that I want to learn about, and then I might just I
right,
like search around for what are the
right,
well-regarded like books on it.
right,
Talking with people. Like math, I think remains very much an oral tradition to some extent, where actually a lot of the insight is passed not through text, but through spoken conversation at blackboards, which is a very important thing for any student
right,
going into math to understand. Where it's like, if you're in college, like definitely value the professors around you and the fact that is the value of where you are right now, as opposed to spending too much time like in the library purely with the textbook. And
right,
yeah, there is no one source, but just trying to like keep my finger in a lot of different directions.
right. Cool. And I was wondering, okay, so you also mentioned, I guess when you were at Stanford, but by the way, you also mentioned Princeton. I know this is a little off topic, but why did you mention Princeton in particular? Did you also get accepted to Princeton or?
Yeah, I remember I was kind of like down to those two in terms of when I was a senior in high school choosing where
Right,
to go, and that
Right.
I in my mind, I think of Princeton as kind of like the center of the math universe, and it's just uh, like Stanford has a great math department as well, of course, but
Yeah.
I sort of think of that as being a little bit more. Well, I don't know what to say. I think the natural trajectory going to an East Coast school like that is going to be either one of pure academia or getting spat out into finance, right? In a way that the like West Coast has a little bit more of this entrepreneurial bent. It's not as clear cut as that, obviously. Like nothing falls prey to the stereotypes, but
Right.
loosely speaking, like the winds vaguely blow in those directions.
Right. But okay. Sorry, that wasn't I was what was I building on? I had a question that was going to build on that. But I guess coming from somebody who still doesn't really know where he's going to go for math, because I'm still, waiting in that limbo phase of waiting to hear back from universities.
Oh,
Do you
this is
think
so you're a senior. You're a senior, and you're in that
correct? Yeah,
active.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, I
how
should have prefaced with
nerve-wracking and
that.
fun. No, no, no. That is fun. And actually, so this is good. How are you thinking about as you're choosing like where to go, or choosing where to apply? What has the thought process been, or what do you feel like you're optimizing for?
It's hard to say what I'm optimizing for. Uh, I hate to say it. The thing is, like, I wouldn't say I'm just this like pure math person. Like, I don't really see myself, spending the rest of my days, trapped in a room, working on, this singular problem, right? I'm sort of into this kind of interdisciplinary stuff, and applying math to fascinating problems that, ground us, that, we can see in the real world. Um, but again, in terms of what I'm optimizing for, I don't really know like where I'm going to fall in terms of that. I just, like you said, I know I have this big passion for math, but in
I
terms of,
think that's
I feel,
great. I think most people who study math, I would recommend they do math and something. Like it actually feels better for the math and for the world if
right,
people like
right,
you are pairing it together with something where one, it can keep the abstract stuff
right,
more grounded, but then also there might be insights that you have to offer on adjacent fields that
right,
come from this like abstract framework that you're building, which
right.
otherwise would be opportunity lost if you're purely in that one
There we
world.
go.
Also, you know, the reason that we fall in love with certain things can be kind of arbitrary. And I think leaving room for serendipity to find other kinds of love and not getting yourself into one particular groove too early, uh, that can be very valuable. Now, it's helpful to have a default direction, right? Like no wind favors someone without a destined port. But nevertheless, certainly at your age, leaving the room to be flexible to say, even though like, hey, I'm a math guy, I really love it, not necessarily being set in stone that like that's the only thing that you're going to learn and study. I mean, if I look back at my time in college, some of my favorite courses, right? Like there was a course on improv, which I wish I had taken earlier, was one regret, or this like
Like improv
uh,
comedy.
yeah, yeah. This like philosophy seminar that was like one of the most invigorating things because it was like me, my
Really
brother, one of our best friends, and like a
great.
random freshman, and we would just like yell at each other for like 2 hours on
Nice.
like the material that we've
Nice.
been going on, or like a short story like writing class, or
Right.
I wish I had done more physics. Like I said, I was spending as much time in the CS department as the math department, but I think but, and it's the classic thing for any liberal education, like kind of getting this diversity. But I think not just viewing them as random course requirements or like graduation requirements, but like really deeply engaging with the idea that there are there are other passions that you will develop in the next decade of your life, and if you discover those earlier rather than later, you will get to flower in them all the more. And so, really,
Right.
kind of embracing that is not to be taken lightly.
Right. It feels so silly to me that when people ask me, "Oh, Conrad, what is it that you're gonna do?" It's just like, I'm interested in math. I want to apply it somewhere. It's just like I don't have a definitive answer, and I don't know. It just feels kind of because people, it feels like already have it all figured out. I mean, maybe that's just a facade, but I don't know.
If you so you already sound like someone who like makes stuff, who has this generative spirit to put stuff out. So
Right.
if you study math, you're going to get hired at places, right? Like there's not going to be an issue with that if you're studying, you're good in it. But It's extremely potent is if you also have an attitude of just making things. And if you view
Right.
your time in the next 4 years, not as much about cultivating a GPA or like a transcript,
Right.
but actually cultivating like a personal portfolio of just stuff that you've made and a set of experiences for what it's like to actually um, bring things from concept to reality. Like
Right.
that combined with being just a just a technically savvy, good problem solver kind of person, it's such a potent combination that you don't need a clarity on like this is the precise job type that you're going to go into, especially because the category of jobs just it shifts very rapidly, right? There's a classic saying on, your grandchildren are going to have a job that doesn't even exist today. But I think that saying is spanning two generations, but that gap actually gets smaller and smaller. Like my job did not exist, when I was, when I
Right.
was like a young kid and if I was
Right.
like saying, hey, what do I want to be when I grow up? I think
Right.
just the landscape of what jobs in general look like right now is kind of very, very in flux, and you should instead focus on general principles where you will be able to plug yourself in a way that is
Right.
both productive to the world and also like enriching to you. And it sounds like you have the two things that are like quite potent for that, the like generative spirit, and then just well, I say math savvy in a very broad sense of just like problem
Right.
solving ability. So
Right.
that said, even if you don't have to have the clear answer, it is worth like trying on what various answers to that would look like. So as opposed to saying, I'll figure it out, which you will, right? And saying, oh, I'm going to figure this out by the time I graduate. If in your freshman, you're like, I don't know if this is actually what I want, but I'm just going to see. Suppose I want to be a X. I don't know what X is, but you just choose almost at random, but you take very seriously what that would mean.
Like a
Maybe
thought
that means
experiment.
yeah, maybe that means that's where you try to get an internship next year. Maybe that means
Okay.
that's who you seek out professionals in that and just ask for like an informational interview as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman trying to understand the working world. And the earlier you take those seriously and just try them out, then that can help clarify your thinking. And
Right.
so don't have to set it in stone. You shouldn't like set your trajectory in a way that's one way, but there are a lot of college students who put off that thought until their junior senior year and then just feel a little bit scrambled in comparison, and their experience ends up more scrambled in comparison to those who like really thought they knew what they were going to do, went down that path, discovered something they didn't love about it,
Right.
and kind of
Right.
course corrected.
Right.
So I don't know what that looks like concretely for you, but I I would say there's some awkwardness and scariness in putting on a like temporary identity like that, but just trying it on, you will learn a lot more from that than simply saying,
Right.
I will figure it out later. Even though
Right.
the truth is, like, you really will. There's nothing to worry about.
Right. I don't know. I just find it so fascinating that you ended up in this content creation route because you're right. I mean, you mentioned that it's almost like you found this Goldilocks zone in which if you had come to it later, perhaps, I don't know, maybe the market per se would be oversaturated in some way, right? And then if you had come to it earlier, well, there would be no market for it really.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
where do you think you would have gone if, or where do you think you would have pursued if you'd come, I don't know, before, earlier? I don't know, this is a thought experiment in itself.
I mean, it's hard to know.
Right,
There was a lot of momentum towards math academia. There's momentum towards like data science in terms of like where internships and such were
right,
spent. Doing something in the like software Silicon Valley world would have been pretty
right,
on deck. I I think one of the delightful things about just the sensitivity of all these trajectories to initial conditions is that like you kind of have no idea, and the unpredictability of where you are is an indication of just how unimaginable the adjacent paths also
yeah,
are.
right,
So in a deep way, the answer is like I have no idea what would have happened otherwise. But that's kind of the delight and
fair.
fun of it, is just how the space of possibilities is broader than your imagination.
Right. All right. I guess I don't want to take up your time because you're a busy guy, right? So
Tell you what,
yeah.
let's do like one or two more questions,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then I
Yes. Sorry, Grant, for keeping you.
No,
I'm
no,
sure
this
you
is
have
great.
places to be. Okay.
This, frankly, I'm very glad that you've been game to let me like ask you because I honestly get a lot more out of this just by connecting with you rather
Right.
than like sitting here and like reading off, pre-baked questions or
Of
something.
course.
So,
Yes. But I'm sure I don't know how satisfactory my answers were. Just, just pure, my brain fodder. I don't know.
well, actually, on that last point, I'm curious. When I was saying like try on something, I'm curious for
Yeah.
someone like you, if you just gun to your head, you're like, man, I've got to like pretend like I know what my career will be. What are the immediate ones that come to mind as things that you feel drawn to at this phase of life?
Grant, you're asking the heavy questions here. That's a good question. Um, hmm. I always, I mean, in the first place, I really did want to become a pure mathematician. That was sort
Mhm.
of sort of my dream in my, middle school and early high school years. But again, as I alluded to previously, I felt like I sort of, as I don't know, I grew to become a more social being that wasn't nestled in my bedroom through all of the COVID years.
Well,
I
do you
felt
know
like I
how
wanted,
social like professional mathematics is, right? Like it's
yeah,
not,
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely
right.
not like an isolating,
That's
if
true.
anything, it's like chat with mathematicians. I know you already
Right.
take a lot of classes at Rice, but just like wherever you end up school, that is one of the things that surprises people because the conception
That's
is one
true.
of it being like these lone nuts just at a blackboard working on one
Right.
problem, and the
Right.
reality is like a dramatically more social one.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I guess I meant more so sort of dwelling with the abstract.
Hmm.
It was less so the fact that it's not social and more so the fact that I sort of sought something a little more tangible. I don't know if maybe that's something sacrilegious to say,
No, no.
because
If anything, I think more people like you should have that take on like abstraction
right,
in and of itself can't be satisfying, but it should
right.
be a means to an end.
Exactly. Because I feel like there's always these like two sides of me that are at war. And it shouldn't be at war. I don't know why I phrase it like that, but it's almost like just this innate beauty of math, which I feel like I would be content with. Um, but then again, there's this yearn towards translating that beauty into something that, can actually, however cliche that may sound, but have a tangible impact on the world and on people. And I guess these two things can certainly collaborate, right? They don't have to exist in isolation of one another, I'd assume.
No, and I
Right.
think even if that's not a direct answer to the question, which is totally fair because like high school seniors do not need to have an answer to that question. I think what that tells me is that you're already thinking about it in the right way, where I think there is a risk of when you're in school and the emphasis is on like your own learning to like view intellectual curiosity as an end in and of itself, which it in some artistic sense like can be, or like, hey, how do we all like what like idealistic utopian future would you want to live in? It's like everyone's self-actualizing and learning. That's all great.
Right.
But there is this transition that happens where the metric of success shifts around towards instead centered not on like, are you growing, but instead, are you adding value to other people's lives, which hinges on you knowing how to do stuff and being an expert in something. But there is this difference between that being the goal in and of itself, which it is in school, and then
Right.
that being a means towards being like a generative value adding person, which it is after school. So if already you have this itch where like the pure math on its own is not satisfying or the abstraction on its own is not satisfying and you want to like have a footprint, great. And I think what that maybe means, the beauty of how like empowering present software tools are for individuals to just make stuff today,
Right.
is that like you can actually spend a lot of the next 4 years just actually thinking what can I do that's not just a toy project to maybe
Right.
make some person's life better, but like actually just take a stab at it, just make a thing that every time
Right.
you run into a problem or your friends run into a problem, say like, oh, let me try to solve that. Let me try to make that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe they don't work, but like there's some chance that something that you do just turns out to. I'll give an example. We'll end
Okay.
with something that's not maybe an example. In 2021, I had a set of interns, and one of them named Josh Poland. I'm like, this kid's just is just he's just great. whatever he does in the world is going to be great. And
Right.
what I loved about him, he knew how to build stuff really readily and was super savvy with software, but
Yeah.
he was determined to be a math teacher. He just knew he wanted to be a high school or middle school
Wow.
math teacher,
Yeah.
saw a lot of value in that. So he was going to do that. But he also was very, very savvy at building, and I think has this interest in that. And so I checked in with him recently just to feel like, how's it going? Right? Because he's not at this point a math
Yeah.
teacher, but I know he's got this itch to make things. And he was referencing this project that he did called Shuffle Buddy that was centered around uh, coming up with a seating chart in classes where that to folks like you and me were like, okay, what's the problem? You just like write people's names in rectangles. Like, how is this a hard problem? But he's like,
Yeah.
it was like, it was just this surprisingly time consuming thing where there's all these constraints on like for compliance reasons, this particular kid has to be like in the back of the room, or this one has harder side has to be in
Yeah.
the front. These
Yeah.
two just went through a breakup, so we can't sit them together. And like all these different
Right.
constraints, it was like, it was actually a little bit of pain. So he's like, I wrote this super scrappy thing to just get it, just like the dumbest piece of software that I could think of initially. Of course, he writes great things, so it probably wasn't that, but to like solve that problem. And he called it Shuffle Buddy, and then like made a short video to describe it. And it like just kind of like viral among the teaching communities in the US, and like a ton of people actually use it, where it's a kind of thing that I don't know, the like no business school student would think like this is the product that I want to build. They just wouldn't even think
Right.
of it. But the person sitting there that both had the need and had the technical savvy to just make it, just whip it up and
Right.
make it. He like solved this small problem that was pernicious to a lot of people in a way that
Right.
those of us not actively teaching in a classroom just don't even think about.
Right.
And so in that same way, just people who have that spirit of hey, let's just make things, if they're also kind of on the lookout for problems, don't have to be huge problems, just little ways to make
Right.
someone's life better. If you kept that mindset in the next 4 years of your life, there's a very decent chance by the time you're kind of senior in college and someone's asking you this question and that you're in a little bit more of a hot seat because like the question matters more 4 years from now than it does now. Actually, you're going to have this history to build on of knowing like both maybe one of the things you made was actually quite successful. Maybe one of them turns out to be a nice entry point into a company doing similar things. And it's a way better starting point to talk to a company having a
Yeah.
concrete thing that you've built that you can talk about as opposed to
Right.
just like a transcript. Um, Maybe you've built a little bit more intuition on what kind of problems are real, which ones are not, which kind of ones lend themselves to the problem solving tactics that you yourself feel well suited for, which ones don't.
Right.
And the mistake to make would be if you view the function of the next 4 years as one of like coursework is the primary end, right?
Yeah.
It's good,
Yeah.
right? And it has this valuable place where it's a place to align with other students and meet them. It's a place to have shared problems. The learning
Right.
is presumably like the learning is real, right? So
Right. Right.
it's worth doing. I'm not saying like don't do the coursework, but the flaw would be to say like the coursework is the end in and of itself. Or if
Yeah.
you just do that, then that will be like a successful
Right.
college experience had. And so this is all a long-winded way of saying like take the same spirit that the young like sixth grader version of you who said, hey, I'm just going to make some content and put it up because this
Right.
is a thing I feel passionate about. Just like hold on to that same spirit, and then I'm quite sure there's a pretty bright future waiting there.
But it's almost like this. So, sorry, do you think I could just say one more thing?
Yeah. Let's go.
I don't know, like the spirit of building, I feel like it almost shoots me in the foot sometimes too, because I feel like I don't I have a hard time sort of deciding like I've tried I like applying math in various different areas and it's like I have a hard time discriminating which areas I prefer applying it to. I don't know whether I'm big into theater, and so my theater director had problems with sort of coordinating sort of which prop movers which move which props and at what time, and sort of to create this most optimal way of clearing out a scene and facilitating a scene change, right? And so just again, like what you mentioned, these little problems, no matter how sort of grandiose they are, they're like, oh, maybe I could take a stab at that, with my knowledge of
Mhm.
math. And it turns out I could. And so I went down that route. And then I'm also a drummer. And so when it came to drums, I was like, I wonder if I could sort of isolate a drum beat and isolate the different parts of a drum beat to sort of break it down more easily for myself. So I tackled that. But the problem was I wasn't like, okay, I prefer this over the other. I sort of just enjoyed the process of sort of solving the problem. And so the reason I say that shoots me in the foot is like I don't I feel like a nomad. I feel like I could go here and enjoy it. I could go here and enjoy it. Where the heck do
That's
I
fine.
stop? You
Yeah,
know
no,
what I mean?
I think you don't have, yeah, there doesn't have to be like, oh, and this is the concrete endpoint. Like,
Right,
there will be an age when you have to um, make a different trade-off on the explore versus exploit trade-off. But like
right,
the delight of the age where you are now is that you're very well justified in spending more on that exploration rather than exploitation side of that. Um,
right,
so that's not shooting yourself in the foot. I think if you're like, oh, this if it feels haphazard, I don't know, to like go do this little project and then like go do this other one, that's fine. As long as I think the one thing I would say is for each one, have some notion in mind of what constitutes like a milestone or some form of completion so that uh, if you're going to go down into a little hole, you know that you've gone sufficiently that you didn't just
right.
stop because something got hard. So choose a milestone ahead, and it doesn't have to be huge, but something to say if I got to this point, then I know like that counts as a project, as opposed to like
Right.
I like messed around in some code for a bit, and I don't know, I like watched some YouTube videos to better understand like this
Yeah.
domain,
Yeah.
and then something like it's very easy to just like wander because there's some hard problem that you're not addressing or some hairiness that you're like your mind doesn't want to get to because it's not the fun part. Um, when I so actually when I started with Manim, the I was
Yeah.
viewing the first video I made basically as like a milestone on okay, I want this little side project on like make some mathematical animations and such,
Yeah.
but just to have a thing that's an endpoint to like a packageable thing to say like was this a real project or was it just like messing around. I was like make one video lecture with it, like
Yeah.
6 minute video that time. Like that was like the function of that video was not I want to start a YouTube channel. The function of that video was like is this little side coding project for me a real project or is it something that just was like random play in Python. And
Right.
so in that case it turned out to be quite fruitful. But simply having it as um, a a metric to keep you honest adds a lot of value.